Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for February the 16th. It's Friday, of course, end of the week, but of course we will be looking forward to the game on Sunday. Rangers taking on St Johnstone. It is press conference day as well, so we'll hear from Philip Clement and whatever player Rangers put up ahead of that trip to Perth. Jonny joins me. How are we doing, Jonny?
Good, mate. Good. Feeling refreshed. I'm getting a bathroom put in at the moment, so I had to shower and work this morning.
Wow, how was that?
That's a different experience, I'll give it that. But it was a nice big shower, nice and hot. I don't know. It was fine.
There you go. I'm sure it'll be worth it when it's all installed. Right, I used to.
It's a nightmare, Derek. Don't get your bathroom done. It's just it's worse than getting your kitchen done.
We get it done a couple of years ago, and we had to sort of shower, if you like, using the Neil Lennon air quotes in our kitchen, using a basin. Olden days, so it wasn't the best, but well worth it now. But anyway, people are tuning in to talk all things Rangers. Just a quick word, folks, as you know, for our podcast sponsors, the MPH Group. If you're looking for some home improvements or even a new boiler, then these are the guys to call. Maybe you're looking for a new bathroom. The all-important links are in the description below, so do go and check them out. Right, before we talk about the game on Sunday, Jonny, news yesterday coming out from the SFA revealing the 13 VAR mistakes over the latest round of fixtures. It's 10 more than in the first round, and only 3 mistakes were identified. The big news is that a number of those mistakes happened in games involving Rangers. One of them being in the Livingston and Rangers game back on the 12th of November. VAR, it says, should have recommended an on-field review after Ross McCausland was awarded a penalty. Decision should have then been not to award the penalty. The other decisions involving Rangers, 2 came in the same game against Dundee on the 9th of December. VAR should have recommended an on-field review for a penalty after a foul on Abdallah Sima. The on-field decision of no penalty should have stood. And also in that same game, VAR should have recommended an on-field review after Jose Cifuentes was awarded a yellow card. The on-field decision of a yellow card should have stood. The Celtic Rangers game, VAR should have recommended an on-field review for a potential penalty for a handball offence by Alistair Johnston. The panel noted an offside in the build-up, so the decision should have remained to not award a penalty, it adds. And the other game involving Rangers, the 2nd of January, against Kilmarnock at Ibrox, VAR should have not recommended an on-field review for a penalty for a handball against John Souttar. The on-field decision of not to award a penalty should have stood. First of all, it's good to get a bit of a little bit of transparency here, Jonny, and finding out why decisions were and were not given. What do you make of this? I think everyone will be looking at that Old Firm game. I know there was a lot of noise surrounding it in the days and weeks afterwards, but the SFA coming out and admitting that they got some VAR calls wrong.
Okay, so I want to clarify, Derek, because it's not really that. So listen, every round of fixtures, the SFA have an off-the-record, which means we can't go into the detail of it, briefing with journalists, where they play the audio and clips from high-profile controversial incidents and then talk through them off the record and then on the record normally. So I was involved in this meeting. It was over Zoom. Normally it's in person, but this time it was over Zoom, which meant it was a little bit less debate in the room. Well, there was a lot less debate. There was no debate in the room as the presentation was being given. Normally each individual incident is discussed. That wasn't the case in this situation. But it's important to clarify that this isn't, as Maka is saying in the comments, the SFA admitting VAR mistakes. That's not what this is. This is an independent panel that has been appointed by the SFA, which includes elite standard former managers, players, coaches, etc., who are guided by an expert in the laws of the game. So they are completely independent. They've got nothing to do with the SFA. And the whole point is to give feedback that is above the level of the inner workings of the SFA. And listen, I think the SFA ought to be commended, number one, for doing that, and number two, for being transparent about where the mistakes were. Because while the last briefing, which took place, which I was also at, there was, I think, 3 mistakes that this independent review panel had highlighted. This time there were 13 to bring it to 16 for the season. So a significant jump. And there were a number of Rangers ones in there. Now, here's the thing. The SFA may well agree with some of these. Like, for example, I think it's pretty safe to say that the SFA agree that Willie Collum should have been referring Nick Walsh to the monitor in terms of the handball by Alistair Johnson. But if they'd done that, obviously they would have then checked the attacking phase of play and would have seen that there was indeed a very narrow offside. I don't think they would have a problem with that one. But I think there's others there that the SFA would say, you know, we don't necessarily agree with that. Like, for example, when I scroll down the different incidents, just to take a Rangers one, VAR should not have recommended an on-field review for a penalty after a foul on Abdul Asima. I mean, I thought that was a Stonewall penalty. It was a clear shot pull. To me, that's an absolute penalty. He was stopped from jumping for the ball, and the ball was coming into his vicinity. So I don't really understand where they're coming from with that. I think shot pulling should be stamped down on. I think that is good for the game. That's the case. So I disagree. I personally disagree with the independent panel on that one. And I'm sure there's others. You know, the Jose Cifuentes one, I think, was a pretty marginal one. I think it was a yellow card. But
why when Rangers appealed was it not downgraded? That's my issue with it.
But I'll tell you why, Derek. Because anyone who's looking for consistency, and I hear this all the time, journalists do it like there is no consistency when it's subjective. So the ref's opinion is different to the opinion of the independent review panel, which is different to the panel that's looking at the incident, because they're narrow margins and it's all about interpreting rules. So I get why it's frustrating, but let's just be smart about it. Everyone's coming at these incidents with their own personal biases and their personal understanding of what the words and the laws of the game say. And so you're always going to get debate. And that's why VAR hasn't really solved the nonsense around refereeing in Scottish football, because fundamentally, a lot of it is subjective. Like the Willie Collum handball. I mean, to me, that was a penalty. It's a certain... It wasn't Willie Collum that handled the ball, obviously. It was Alistair Johnson, but Willie Collum incident from VAR. Yeah. It's a certain penalty, but there's other people who I know who think it wasn't a penalty, that it was a natural movement and that the ball's just
no chance.
So I totally disagree with that, Derek. But the point I'm trying to make is, even in something I think is clear cut personally, there are other people that don't have that viewpoint. And this is not someone from a Celtic background I'm talking about. So I think it's really, really difficult to get that consistency. And the debate needs to be a bit more mature than we need to bring consistency. You're never going to get consistency. You just can't get consistency because no two incidents are ever the same. And I think that's a mistake people make all the time, is they show one tackle and they say, but what about this tackle? Well, the velocity is different, the position on the pitch, the context of the game at the time, the players, everything is different. And while they may look on the surface of it quite similar, they're not the same. And that to me is why it's so difficult to be a referee. And listen, people always say, "Oh, you back the referees. You know, you're too easy on them. That you need to you're going tough on them." But I just think I look at these guys and I think I would not want to do your job. What a horrible job! Because especially in Scotland, where we have this culture of conspiracy theory around football, imagine having to put up with that in your daily life. I can't imagine how difficult that must be. I know they're well paid, but
this is something that I think about often. They need to go to Aldi's, Lidl's, out and do the daily. They mean they've got jobs as well. They're part timers, so they need to live lives in Scotland. We know what the Goldfish Bowl is like. It gets up there in Scotland, so it will be difficult. The scrutiny on and all that. That's why I've seen that some people suggesting we should be looking at referees out with Scotland for the high-profile games that don't have that sort of don't have that baggage, if you like, of knowing that they're scrutinised so much in Scotland. But
I don't think we should do that, Derek. I think that's pandering.
Yeah,
we shouldn't pander. Fundamentally, I think Philip Clement absolutely nailed it. Absolutely nailed it when he talked about Willie Collum and welcoming him back to do that game, because I think Rangers need to be above all this kind of petty nonsense. Leave that to other people, and I think it should be condemned. The referees have a tough job. They don't always get it right. They make mistakes. It's really frustrating when it's your team, and there can be incidences where it's more than really frustrating. It's infuriating when it's really important, and we know how tight things are in the league at the moment.
Yeah,
but the one thing I think they should do, Derek, and we've discussed it on here before, I know you agree, is to create a full-time referee role, and to ensure that these guys can come in and improve their craft and be better, because I don't think there's any doubt that they could be better. And to get them in as full-timers, working on their craft day in, day out, making sure their fitness is top-notch, looking over decisions that have been made. How could we do that better? How could we communicate better? I think that would make an enormous difference, Derek. I really, really do. And we're always talking about how important the game is up here, how big a part of the Scottish culture it is. And of course, I endorse that. Of course, you endorse that. So let's prove that we actually care. Let's make sure the referees are the best possible referees they can be. And the way they do that is by concentrating full-time on their craft.
Yeah. They should have been full-time before we got VAR in, is my opinion. That's my view on it. James Skeen says Scotland need at least 6 full-time referees for big matches. Hugh with the point as well, an interesting one. Why don't the referees not get mic'd up like in the rugby? I would like to see that, Hugh, I've got to say. I'm sure the language would be colourful on the pitch, but who knows? I think it would be very insightful. I think we've seen it recently. I don't know where it was, Jonny, but it happened recently at a game, and I thought it was refreshing to hear the referee on the pitch speaking to the players. I think that would be a positive step, but whether that happens in the near future, I doubt it.
We've got to ask whether or not further transparency actually helps them. So, for example, in the meeting, I think it was fairly safe to say that they felt that they tried to offer additional clarity when Sky asked them to provide the lines that showed that Sima was offside, that then confused everything because people didn't understand why it was a handball, why the handball wasn't given, and then now you're seeing offside lines. It looked like something had been fudged. And listen, I actually don't believe it was. I just think it was incompetence and poor decision making. They should have just left it the way it was. But that was them trying to provide transparency and say, look, it would have been offside when we checked the APP, so don't. We get that it's a subjective decision and it's going to leave a lot of people het up, but here's the facts. So I think the argument would be from the SFA is, look, when we're trying to do these things, everyone jumps on it because they're upset and they're angry and they're frustrated from the emotion of the game. Where I would come in, Derek, is I don't know about the audio. I think that might be, I think for the time being, that's maybe a stretch too far in the realpolitik of this world that we live in Scotland. I don't think that'll happen, but I do think we need to get to a stage where there is more transparency. For example, there is absolutely nothing to stop the SFA releasing the rules that they're using to make controversial decisions. So have a part of the SFA website where they say the reason for this decision was X and the reason for that decision was Y, and quote the laws of the game in the paragraph, just so we have the context of why the decision was made. Yeah. I don't see why that would be an issue whatsoever. But listen, there's people at the SFA who are trying to modernise, and it's an old-fashioned organisation, and it's going to take time to do that.
Yeah. It needs revolutionised. Let's get to some of the points that are coming in. Just off the back of that, Macca's point, and it's in the news this morning about Willie Collum that he raised. He's in the frame to referee the next Old Firm match. Will takes place at Ibrox, of course, on April the 6th. or the 7th. It is the final game before the split. So it looks like Willie Collum may be getting the nod. Referee Chief Crawford Allen says Willie will be in the frame with every other referee for consideration for games, whether they be in the league, in the cup, or whatever. We'll make that decision nearer the time. He's not good enough to referee this game. That's my personal opinion, Jonny.
Derek, it's a total non-story. Willie Collum would be referee in that game, I don't think.
Yeah.
But they're not going to come out and say, oh no, Willie won't be involved. Of course they're going to say he's in the frame.
Yeah.
I mean, to say no, he won't be in the frame would provoke huge headlines. It wouldn't be wise to put him in the frame, and certainly not in the VAR room. Listen, there's another aspect to this, which is being in the VAR room and being on the pitch are two very different skill sets, Derek. You know, there's a technological aspect to being in the VAR room. There's a speed of thought. There's working under pressure in a way that's slightly different to working under the pressure that you are on the pitch. And, you know, someone like Willie Collum, who's an elite grade referee, whether or not you believe that he's an elite referee in a subjective sense is another matter. He is, you know, in the UEFA list. So he's away doing these big games, and clearly he's got all the experience that is associated with someone with that level. So, you know, when it comes to a match, Willie Collum can referee it with his eyes shut because he's had all that experience of doing it. Whereas in the VAR room, we're talking about guys who have been doing it for maybe 6 months, a little bit longer than that, a year now. So they're still learning their craft. And I think there's an argument to be had about, is Willie Collum a good VAR? Is that where he shows his strength as a referee? And to me, that's a slightly different argument. But listen, the Old Firm game, I mean, it's still a little bit away, isn't it? When is it? April,
yeah. I'm just concerned as we've had it, two major big calls that have been made in the last two Old Firm games. I just hope we're not talking about referees at the game at Ibrox. Let's hope we're not, and Rangers just do the business, and we're not talking about a contentious goal that was being disallowed or a penalty decision or whatever.
Derek, just see from a human point of view, why would the SFA throw Willie Collum back into the Lions' den like that? I don't think
it would surprise me.
They can leave it for a couple of games, let it all die down, and he can come back into the rota for the following season. I don't think they would do that. But listen, they're never going to say anything other than what they said. I mean, It's completely straightforward, rote line. Boring, very boring.
Yeah, right. Let's get to Rangers, because we've had a great donation that have come in. Thank you very much for your donation, buddy. It's much appreciated. He says, "Hope all is well from Melbourne, lads. You think the league is ours even without an out-and-out striker?" We discussed this. I was on with Ali on the YouTube members Q&A show yesterday, Jonny, and I think this squad is good enough even without a prolific number 9 to go on and win this division. I know that the game during the week had left many supporters, including myself, frustrated at the amount of chances that Rangers created and just couldn't get that elusive fourth goal. I think Rangers, the firepower that they have, I'm still confident that it's good enough to go on and win the league. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, listen, I've been saying for some time, Derek, that I think Rangers will win the league. I look at the manager, and he just is a guy that you just look at and you think that's a guy you would want to play for and that you would absolutely have confidence in. He's done it 3 times before with 2 different clubs. I think Celtic, while they've also got a good manager, you have to ask whether or not there's the same level of synergy between the fan base, the manager, and the players and the club at the moment. I think you'd be foolish to write off Celtic, Derek. But at the moment, you have to say that this Rangers team is in form that would suggest a league title is likely. Since Clement arrived, what are Rangers ahead? 7 points ahead of Celtic. So that level of form, if it was extrapolated out over the rest of the season, it would be something like a 14, 15, 16 point difference. Now, Celtic will get better when they add Hatate and Carter Vickers back to their side. I don't think that any Rangers fan would deny that, and that'll make them a more difficult opponent to overcome. But there's still a little bit away for those two to return. And I think in the meantime, if Rangers can keep up the level of consistency they're showing, they will be in a very, very good place. And I think you can see the confidence in Clement when he talks about it. Everyone knows, as Burns says, that this side needs a striker, and it needs a guy who you can hang your hat on to go and score goals. If this side had a Shankland or a Miovski, I would be feeling exceedingly confident that Rangers would go on and win the title. Now, without them, what you need Silva to step up.
Yes.
I'm going to say something controversial here, Derek.
Here we go.
Nothing stops me. I can't help myself. I'm still not convinced on Cyril Dessers. I'm never going to be convinced on Cyril Dessers, Derek. I don't think he's the answer. It's fine in games last night when you're hitting you're hitting shots on target. I think 20 shots and 23 shots on target. 43 shots in total. Honestly, think if it's Shankland and not Dessers in there, he's probably getting 5. I'm not even joking, Derek. I think Dessers should have got 5 the other night. It was he's stepped up to the plate in terms of 14 goals for the season. I think is an okay return at this point. But man, he should be getting a lot more. He misses so many chances, and I think that while people are happy with him at the moment because Rangers are winning, it's when you get down to one of these games, and listen, these games will come. You're at Tynecastle. It's a bitty game. You've got 5 shots on goal, and you need someone to convert one of them to give you the 1-0 win. I'm not really comfortable about Cyril Dessers being the guy that has that chance. And I would ask any Rangers fan who's saying that Cyril Dessers is the answer, would you feel comfortable putting a game like that in his hands? I don't think he's there now. His overall stats are really good, but I think sometimes you need to apply the eye test and the data together. And for me, I think he's a lovely big guy, but I just don't think he's a guy you can feel confident about providing you the goals that will lead to the championship, especially in big games where there are big moments. I think over the course of it, we've seen that Dessers in those big games hasn't quite stood up to the plate. The one that obviously comes immediately to mind is that chance against Celtic where he did everything right up to the point he just has to roll it into the corner. And that changes everything in terms of the way he's contextualised as a player. I think, people would always point to that big moment, but he couldn't make it happen. Rangers players need to make these big moments count, Derek.
Yeah. A few points come in before we wrap up. Bob says, same Jonny, hoping Roof and Lovelace can step in and contribute. I know there's a lot of comments saying when is Roof back. It seemed to be Groundhog Day with regards to Kamar Roof. I'm not going to get too excited about seeing him because who knows when that's going to be. Philip Clement usually keeps his cards close to his chest when it comes to players that are out injured. We don't really get time scales. If he can contribute at any point before the end of the season, then that will be a bonus. Zach Lovelace as well. Played in midweek, spoke to a couple of young lads that played against him for Bolton, and they waxed lyrical a lot. They said he was a step above. So I'd imagine he'll be around at the fringes of that first team as well. I'm looking forward to seeing more. I think he was desperately unlucky, Jonny, wasn't he, to suffer that hamstring injury against St Mirren before Clement came in, of course. So he's another one that we don't often think about, but he's someone with a lot of potential that could potentially help the cause.
Yeah, I think so, Derek. Obviously, a multifaceted player who can play multiple positions. So that's always going to be a massive boon, especially when we know that Philippe Clement likes to rotate a little bit, likes to freshen things up. Derek, I know I always talk about this, but Kemar Roof just is the best striker in the league. If Kemar Roof is fit and firing, so whenever I see his name, you just have a sense of if you could just get him back, what a difference he would make.
How many times have we said that?
I know. You just know that guy, if he's right, is right on it and right good enough. So you hope for him as well as a human being. He gets himself into a position where he can come back and provide something to end his career at Rangers in the right way, because I don't think there's any doubt that he will leave at the end of the season. He's well salaried, and I don't think anyone could justify a continued layout on Kmart given his appearances. But you absolutely wish him all the best, because on a human level, it must be really, really difficult for him. You saw him actually going off when he was injured. He went off in tears, didn't he? He went off the field. He was certainly very emotional. And no one's feeling the injury problems that Kemar Roof's had harder than Kemar Roof. So if he could just get back and get some level of fitness, you can imagine he's a guy that could make an impact. There's no doubt about that, Derek.
Yeah,
doesn't need 2 chances. Kemar Roof's a guy who's deadly.
Yeah, I'm not hanging my hat on Kemar Roof, though, given his track record, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But right, we'll wrap up there, folks. Huge thanks to everyone for interacting with the show. Thanks to Jonny as well. As I mentioned, it is press conference day, so we'll hear from the manager later on this afternoon, and we'll also hear from whatever player Rangers put up for the press as well ahead of that trip to Perth on Sunday. Right, we'll speak to you a little later on. Bye for now.